the odds of me getting what I really want out of this are slim to none. But man, wouldn't it be hilarious if I did it anyway? Like, can't I just leave with something awesome out of this? And that has led to really the most profound changes, positive changes.
Welcome everybody to Unleash Your Greatness, and today I have my guest is an amazing person that you're super fun, and we're gonna have a good time chatting today. So his name is AJ Laffredo. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher that. You better just tell me.
Laffredo Dietrich.
Oh my gosh, Laffredo Dietrich. I am horrible with names. Anybody who listens to the show knows that, so I apologize. But AJ, welcome to the show. AJ is a public speaker. He takes what he turned around as being a shy kid and hardly wanting to talk to anybody, and has turned that into a public speaking and teaching opportunity. And he shared the stage with politicians, CEOs, investors. He's been interviewed by Fox, CBS, and NBC, and just an all-around fun guy. And so I'm excited to chat with him today. So AJ, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I'm excited.
And again, I'm sorry about the name. I'm the worst with names. So.
Brother, it's all right. It's you are not the only one. I think it took me until I was 12 years old to be able to pronounce my last name, so I don't fault anybody.
So you and I chatted about a week or so ago, and you told me some of your backstory about how you were really shy growing up and growing. You know, people didn't think you really talked, right? I believe is how you put it. Like, you know, they thought you were almost mute till you were a certain age, and very interesting because I come maybe not quite as shy when I was young, but I was very shy when I was a kid. And so I can absolutely relate with some of the self-esteem and things that come along with that and being really shy. And so I want to turn the time over to you and just kind of explain kind of your backstory, how you went from this shy kid to being like this awesome stage presenter and sharing your story with everybody. So I'm going to turn it over to you and have you kind of give some of that backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, and what you said, you hit the nail on the head. I was shy, but not just like kind of shy. I was really shy. I mean, we're talking to the point where I couldn't even talk to my family. I had a very, very small handful of friends, and I'm talking one or two. And even then, I didn't really talk to them. If I was in any sort of when my parents would force me out of the house to help me get over my social anxiety, which didn't really work all that well. When I did spend time with people, I would sit away in a corner alone and just wait for that time to pass and come home, didn't speak to my friends, didn't speak to my family, didn't talk to anybody. And my childhood consisted really of doing two things. One was playing, admittedly, and I'm not proud of this at all, playing copious amounts of video games. It's a curse, but I will say to this day that the PlayStation 2 is the greatest invention ever created by man. That's a side note. I have no affiliation with PlayStation. Everybody listening, it's just a personal passion of mine. And the other thing that I did was I played guitar, a lot of guitar. Loved composing music. That was really a healthy escape for me. And that was my life until I had an opportunity to leave Pennsylvania at the age of 18 or 19. It was a little bit after I graduated high school. I was working at a gas station, just cleaning toilets and stuff like that, anything I didn't really have to talk to people. And I had this opportunity to move to Richmond, Virginia. My dad stayed in Pennsylvania. My mom moved with my stepdad down to Virginia, and they thought it'd be a really good idea for me to get a change of scenery, be able to reinvent myself. And I saw that opportunity as well. And after much convincing from both of my parents, I eventually made the jump, packed all my stuff, left mostly everything behind, and moved to Richmond. And I knew that I wanted to break out of my shell. I knew that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I hadn't left Pennsylvania in almost 20 years. I didn't know anything outside of Pennsylvania except for a brief stint when I moved to New Jersey for a little bit. But as far as those two states, my life had nothing else to it. And I had this chance to reinvent myself. So what I did at first was just brute force. Go out, try to talk to people, start small, make some eye contact, maybe. It was that sort of thing. I was even talking to a therapist for a little while because I thought that maybe there was something wrong with me. Maybe wrong is not the right word, but some sort of social disorder, some sort of anxiety, whatever it was. I thought maybe talking to a therapist would help, and it did for a little bit. And he gave me some books to read to kind of understand more about how my particular personality worked. But even through all of that, I would come home. I was just frustrated and angry that I wasn't making friends. I was in Virginia for about 9 months and saw virtually zero progress. I still didn't know anybody. And my life was more or less the same, except I was angry at myself because I wasn't doing anything.
No.
And it was around this time that a couple events began to coalesce. The first really was this epiphany that I had. Again, I've been playing guitar. This was probably about 7 years in. I was 19, 8 years in, 18, or 8 years in. There we go. 8 years into playing guitar. I've been playing for a little while, teaching and composing music. And I was thinking, music just seems so random to the untrained ear. People who listen to music who haven't studied it, they hear a bunch of these notes that sound good together, but when they try to sit down and write a song, they're confronted with all these random notes.
Right.
But when you understand music theory, these things begin to make sense. So I was like, man, why couldn't conversation work the same way? And then maybe it can. And I use music theory as a way to make sense of conversation. So that was the first thing, and we can dive into that later. The second, though, is I found like-minded people by working at new jobs and being introduced from very kind people that I met down there, who introduced me to friends of friends of friends who ended up sharing these same issues and obstacles that I was having. And we coalesced into this little group where we would really force each other into these social situations. And so that helped me break my fear and expose myself to my fear in a healthy and supportive way. And all that, once I got good at that, began taking that into university and helping other students who were younger with me that were having some of the same problems. And I was getting involved with the entrepreneurship community at that same time. And then naturally those two things came together and formed my business, Galahad, or the idea of it as it is today.
Awesome. So I want to kind of unpack some of that. First of
Yeah.
all, coming from a shy background myself, like I mentioned, what do you think was the main reason for being so shy? I mean, I don't know if there's a great answer to that. Maybe it's just a personality. I've often asked myself why I was so shy. I think I know part of it. I had a learning disability, and so I felt like I was the dumb kid, right? And didn't like talking to people. But I've often thought, why was I so shy? Why was I so scared to talk to people? And I haven't quite come up with a full answer to that. So I don't know if you have any insight there, what you think might have been to deal with your shyness.
I think, I'm not sure, but if I really had to put a finger on it, I'm an introverted person naturally,
Yeah.
raised by a family of really, really extroverted people. So my dad and my older brother, very loud, very outgoing, good people. I'm not trying to make them seem bad, but it's a environment in which everybody else's voices are not afraid to be loud. And I was very hesitant to be loud. And so that shut my voice out a lot. The other thing too, I mentioned I briefly moved to New Jersey. Well, that was actually a series of moving back and forth. So every 2 years, I would pick up, go to New Jersey, pick up, come back to Pennsylvania, go to New Jersey, come back to Pennsylvania. So I never really established a large core group of friends.
Yeah.
Again, I had maybe one or two that I talked to, but even that was, they would go off and make their own friend groups. And so by the time I'd come back, I was always this outsider. I was constantly playing the role of the outsider in my family, my friends, and eventually, you don't have that the voice that has that authority within a group. And as an introvert, that makes it even harder. So I just gave up talking and found other outlets.
Interesting. And I think so. You brought up a few things that kind of come to mind. Is number one, I think our environment has a big part of it. You kind of came from a household that was very loud, and a lot of people that maybe squished you down or made you feel like I can't voice my opinion, right? Or the things that you feel, and of course, being an introvert doesn't help at all.
No.
I'm an introvert as well, and I really have to push myself to be kind of out there and going and talking to people as well. So I get that, um, as well as I think your core people that you hang out with have a big part in that. And like you said, it wasn't until you got to uh, Virginia and you created that friend group that really helped support you and push you to go out there and talk to people and get outside your comfort zone in a safe way. I think that's a key to anything. That doesn't necessarily mean that we always need that to go push ourselves, but it certainly helps. It's a huge factor, I think, for most people when they feel like they're supported or they have people that are going to cheerleader them on and help them. We're more willing to do things instead of just you know trying to motivate ourselves to go out there and do things like that. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that you point those things out. And I also I find it interesting that music was a key factor in you uh, learning, I guess, how to put yourself out there. This concept of uh, taking this chaos that most people understand as music. And I'm one of those people for sure. I'm not musically inclined at all. I love listening to music. I love, different types of musics. But you give me a sheet of music, you know, with notes and stuff on it, like I'm totally lost. I even was in choir when I was in high school, and I still am awful at trying to figure out how to read music. So to me, it is total chaos, and I don't get it. But for you, it like makes sense. And the fact that you were able to be like, if I can turn that chaos that most people think music is into conversation, which you probably thought was chaos at the time. Like, how do I communicate with people? Like just that. I don't know. I find it really cool and interesting, that shift in perspective that you had going from music to conversation. And I don't think you're the first person ever to take music and apply that to your life in some way. I think there's brilliant people throughout history who've probably done the same thing. But it just fascinates me that that's kind of how you looked at it. It's really cool, actually. So very interesting. I don't know if you want to expand on that anymore and kind of how your thought process was there. I find it intriguing.
Yeah, I when I was younger, and I think there's certain thought processes that are natural to different types of personalities. And this is one of the things that I worked with my therapist over. Actually, my therapist was the first person who introduced me to the concept of introversion and how the pathways in our brains are different, neither better nor worse than extroversion. They're just different. And some of the things that I was thinking began to make sense. And while this doesn't necessarily tie directly into introversion, one of the personality traits that I did have that was common with introversion was this idea of introspection.
Wow.
And through introspection, one of the things that I would often think about was, how do you take frameworks of a science or an art or any sort of theory, whatever that is, and begin to make analogous connections to other disciplines that I might not be so familiar with.
Yeah.
And to give a maybe a more concrete example, if you look at humans and bats, right? We're completely different animals, but if you were to look at a bat skeleton versus a human skeleton, a bat has fingers just like humans. Theirs are just longer. They have forearms just like humans, but they're different proportions, right? It's the same bones, if you will, but they're shaped in different ways that create this entirely new species. And so if you can take this analogous concept and superimpose what you already know onto something else, you begin to make sense of it. And so when I thought about that with music, where you take this idea of chaos, this idea of sound, where things could go in completely different directions, right? Same thing with conversation. You have no idea what's coming next. Music, oftentimes, you have no idea what's coming next, but you can still sense it. You hear a song, you almost know what that next note's going to be, or you know the variations of it. And that's just based off of the context of what you're listening to now. And so it's like, okay, before I thought conversation was an algorithm. So if I say hi, you're going to say X, Y, Z, and then how do I build a tree off of that? And it's trying to predict the future, which just doesn't work with conversation. The big switch with music was, how do I turn that into something where I'm more present? You listen to music in the present, you get an idea what's coming next because you're in the present. Conversation, you can get an idea of what you can say next or what's about to come because you're listening to in the present rather than being stuck in your own mind trying to predict the future.
Yeah, very cool. Very interesting concept and perception, I guess. And of course, being present in your conversations is nothing new. We hear that all the time when you're talking to people, but the way you kind of relate that to music is really pretty profound, I think. And I think you're right. A big part of communication is not trying to predict what your next answer is going to be or the next question to what the conversation is going, but to just listen, be attentive, be present, like you said. And then from there, you can formulate your response or question or whatever. And yeah, so that's awesome. I love that. And I think it's really cool how people see things differently. Now, your kind of framework is centered around music and how it makes sense to you. I talked with a gentleman or met somebody last week who sees everything in color.
Interesting.
And yeah, it was really interesting. Like when he sees someone, he assigns them a color, and to him, colors mean things, right? Like just like music means things to you. Amongst the chaos, he says, he was talking to me, and he's like, "Yeah, you're blue." And I asked him what that was, and he broke it down for me, and it was like almost spot on, like the things I was feeling, the things I was, internalizing, the things going on in my life. It was really fascinating. And so I think it's cool, and of course you have other people have other gifts like empaths, and they can sense people emotions and things like that. But so I love that the world is so full of so many different people, and that we can all see things a little bit differently and kind of relate or put a framework, I guess, like you kind of said, together of how we make sense of the world. And I just love that yours is music. And so again, I'm very not musically inclined as far as producing or writing or singing, but when it comes to music, like it's such a powerful avenue for inspiration or anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, and if you want, I can give you a more hard example. I'm also kind of curious about what my color is now, but
it was crazy. Yeah, it was cool. My wife was orange, and he broke that down, and we both just got chills. Like, oh my gosh, how does he know that just from?
Like he's psychic.
It was crazy. Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So yeah, an example of music you were saying.
Yeah, so we'll take the concept. Well, let's start with the problem that people normally run into.
Yeah.
How many times as an introvert or I don't even want to say an introverted person, just a shy person in general. How many times you hear a shy person, maybe they want to go up to a new person or ask for a raise or ask a girl or a guy out on a date or make a new friend. And what's the first thing that comes to their head? What am I going to say?
Right.
What do I say next?
I would say
And
either that, or what if they laugh at me or reject me or say no, right? Those are, but
right, right. So, and I actually can make an example off both of those. So we'll do it. Let's have some fun with this, right?
yeah.
Let's go with what do they say next, then we'll do the rejection. So in music, you have this concept called modulation, and modulation root word here is modulate, and root note or root word in that is mode. And a mode in music is in music, in Western music, we have 12 notes. And a mode takes some of those notes and puts them in a group.
Mm.
So let's say you have two modes, mode A and mode B, and they have totally different notes, but maybe they share one or two of those. But because they have different notes, they're going to sound different. Maybe mode A sounds really happy when you play it, and mode B sounds kind of sad. And so
Mm.
you're playing this song and you have this happy part, but you want to make it sad. You want to modulate. You want to go into a different mode. Well, how do you do that? And what you can do is to make it not a clunky jump is you take those common notes between the modes, play those, and that helps you transition over into the sadder mode. And if you look at conversation, maybe we're talking about dogs. Okay. We're talking about dogs. Now, you have this concept of dogs, and you have all your different breeds of dogs. You have dog sports, you have TV with dogs, you have dog accessories and websites. And so that conversation can lead onto any one of those nodules or notes within this mode of dog. So maybe we talk about different breeds. I have a German wire hair pointing griffin. And so, oh, they're really good for hunting, right? So I take the German hair wire pointer griffin, say it's good for hunting. Oh, I like outdoor sports. Oh, so you can see how these things can branch off by sharing common concepts.
Just as long
So
as you know what that dog is, that's awesome.
he's my buddy. He's a good boy. He's got a.
You really do
Well,
have one. That's cool.
I
Sorry.
really do have one. Do
Dogs, yeah.
you have one?
I don't have one, but a neighbor of mine had one, and it was the coolest dog. So
Oh,
really, really amazing.
they're great. They got more facial hair than I do, but
Very high
better.
energy too. So
Oh yeah, yeah. He's bonkers unless you take him for like 3 walks, but
yeah.
he's good.
I didn't mean to derail. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. So
No, no, absolutely. You know, that's it's crazy. I've never heard of that dog until like that breed of dog until we got him, and there's like a whole community for him. Um, and it's one of those things like the once you get exposed to that idea, then all of a sudden it starts popping up all over your life.
sure.
I'm not sure if you ever had that phenomenon happen to you before.
Absolutely.
Um, but yeah, so let's take the second example and this idea of this feeling of being rejected, and we'll take it with music.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people, when they're afraid to play music and get up on stage, they're afraid of messing up or fudging a note. And if you listen to any sort of musician and you listen to their live shows, if you listen close enough, you will probably hear them misplay at least 100 notes. But for some reason, it sounds good. And the reason that is because they play those wrong notes confidently and they don't let it interrupt their conversation. So it's the same thing. You go up to somebody, you say something, you get shot down, you can kind of tuck your tail and, run away, or you can let slide, try to pick up that conversation where it left off. So a little shorter example, but it's the same concept as playing music. So for me, this is how my mind works is, how do these things tie together in the realm of music and music theory?
Yeah, awesome. And I love talking about rejection because
Mm-hmm.
I really think that most, maybe not most, but a lot of introverts or shy people
Mm-hmm.
are, that's one of the things that really holds them back. And,
Absolutely.
and maybe not even just them, but most people are scared of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
They're scared to go ask that girl or guy out on a date, or to just ask them for their name or phone number, or they're scared to go and, I don't know, anything, right?
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable to put ourselves out there and be scared of rejection. And I think that number one, I think we let that stop us a lot in life. We worry about what other people are gonna think or what they're gonna say, and then when they do reject us, it hurts, right?
Hmm.
Um, but if there was a gentleman on Instagram, I can't remember his name right now, but he had like the 100 rejection, like I can't remember thing that he was trying to do. So he was trying to get 100 rejections from people,
Yeah.
like hard rejections, like not maybe a maybe or okay, we'll see. Like he wanted like people to tell him no, thank you. And
Yeah.
so he would just randomly ask people crazy things. And it's funny because he was a very good looking guy. He was a model, like a male model. He was, you'd look at him and be like, oh, that guy's got everything going for him, the muscles and the hair and the look. But he was a very deep introvert and very scared of talking to people. And so he challenged himself to go and get these like 100 rejections, and he would film them and document them, and then he would say, yes, I was a rejection, or no, they did what I asked them to. and
Yeah.
and it was crazy, like some of the stuff, like I'm trying to remember, but it was like, hey, can I listen to that song on your phone that you're listening to? Can I share your headphones, like on the subway or whatever? And people
Yeah.
would be like, sure, and hand them their headphones. And, or the guys out there like using the big old plow thing to do the sidewalks in New York to get rid of the snow. And he's like, hey, can I try it? And the guy's like, sure, here you go. Like crazy things. It was amazing how many times he actually got a yes and very few that he actually got a no.
Yeah.
And we just have to be willing to ask, I think, and put ourselves out there. So
A- Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that because when it came to that group that I mentioned before, that was really what we came together on as far as the root cause of fear. It wasn't necessarily the fear of people, it was fear of the reaction of the people, namely in the form of rejection. And as far as us breaking our fear of speaking to people, it was really more breaking our fear of rejection by, I like to put it this way. Have you ever seen the show Impractical Jokers?
yeah.
Okay, so for people who haven't watched Impractical Jokers, it's four friends, and they dare each other to do really stupid things in public. And the whole premise of the show is that the friends don't do those dares or those stunts. Whoever scores the least amount of points has to do something really, really horrifying at the end of the show, much to their social social health. It does a lot of damage to their social health. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And we had decided if we want to get over our fear of embarrassment and get over our fear of rejection, we should do something like that. So that led to many a story. Some were, we only had two rules. We weren't allowed to break the law and we weren't allowed to hurt anybody but ourselves.
Wow.
Um, so that meant we can't hurt anybody physically, emotionally, or mentally. We didn't want to basically don't make anybody else the butt of our joke.
Right.
We have to be the ones who take the brunt of the force.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, golly, we had silly ones like where we would have to dance in grocery stores and knock cereal boxes off the shelves with people watching. We had some more innocent ones where it was like I did one where it was 30 days of doing a good deed. Everything from buying flowers for random strangers to buying them coffee to helping them shovel snow out of their driveways. But I would have to be the one to approach. I wouldn't have to I would have to go up to somebody not looking for help and help them.
Yeah.
To more funny ones where I had to try to talk my way into the New York Stock Exchange, which did not work. I ended up ticking off one of the guards pretty bad, but
Oh wow. So that's awesome, and basically the same premise as that gentleman. I think that I was following on Instagram,
yeah.
and just putting yourself out there
Hmm.
and expecting, I guess, to be rejected, but at the same time being surprised when people are like, yeah, let's do that, or you can do that, or whatever. And I think that, and I don't know what your experience was, if you had a lot of rejections, or if you had people that were like, yeah, you can help me do this, or you can, but I would imagine it was kind of more, I would say more people are willing to say yes than no. I would say.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And to give you some, I'll say more empirical evidence. It was one of our friends' birthdays, and we had decided. So we were a little bit later on in this journey to where we were able to survive, I'll say. So I would even dare say enjoy some more social outings, and we had gone to Atlantic City. And there's a bunch of clubs and bars, and we're not naturally those sorts of people, but we said, hey, let's go out and try it. And one of the things that we did that we would dare each other to do is we would dare each other to sneak into the VIP sections of these clubs and bars, which normally you have to pay like a lot of money to do.
Yeah.
And we did this to probably about 4 or 5 of the bars. Now, the one we got rejected from, they literally took us by the pants and collar and threw us out onto the sidewalk. But the other ones, like people like, are you supposed to be here? And as long as it's an bouncer, we'd be like, no, we just kind of walked in and be like, oh, all right, we'll just take a seat and have a drink. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, we appreciate your moxie, I guess.
That's awesome. Wow, that's so cool. So you go through this process of getting, doing all these crazy things, getting out of your comfort zone, getting out of your, I guess, shyness is the best word to use.
Yeah.
And you decide, I want to go and start helping people.
Mm-hmm.
You start at the school, you said, helping people with the college that were a little bit younger than you, but eventually you get on stage. And if I remember right, you actually gave a TED talk, right, on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so tell me a little bit about that process and how I imagine that was, someone who was super, afraid of speaking, and public speaking is one of those main fears that anybody has. It's number two, the number two biggest fear of the human population. Number one is death. And so there's death, public speaking. It always blows me away. But yeah, it's like the number two fear out there. And so here you are, you go out there and you start getting on stages and giving TED Talks. Let's hear a little bit of that journey. And now here you are, obviously not scared at all to get on camera, to talk, to carry on a great conversation. But yeah, let's hear a little bit more of that journey. I love it.
Absolutely. So it started out, I'll start with where the offer came from. As I mentioned before, I was in university, and keep in mind, I was working at some kind of cruddy jobs before I went into university. I was one of those people who graduated high school, said, I don't want to go to college, work some cruddy jobs, and said, maybe I should go to college. And yeah, so I wasn't that much older. I was probably 3 or 4 years older than most of the students, but enough when you're in your mid-20s compared to people fresh out of high school, that's definitely perceived seniority in when you're that young. And as I was going through university, I went to art school, so a lot of these students were, they would be making paintings that they would work 50 hours on and sell them for maybe $100, which is $2 an hour. Severely undersell them. Now, at the same time, I was taking classes in venture creation and entrepreneurship, which really expanded my horizons in that direction. It's when I was first exposed to it. And so I was getting these ideas of, oh, this is how you price work and this is how you negotiate. And I had those social skills to, even though I was far from the strongest artist in my school, I was maybe middle of the pack, and I'm being generous there. I was able to sell my stuff for way, way more than what other people were selling it for. And I would say it wasn't nearly as good of quality, but I knew how to sit down, talk to people and say, this is what I want. This is how I'm going to get it. These are the contracts. I'm sticking by my guns, yada, yada, yada. And when I noticed that a lot of the students were having trouble with that, I was like, all right, well, let me share with them some of the entrepreneurship stuff that I've been learning. And the concepts, the business math is nothing hard. It's, basic division, right? You work 100 hours on something or 50 hours on something, you get paid $100, you're making $2 an hour. So if you want to make $10 an hour, you should be charging, what is it, 500 for it, right? If you're working 50 hours on it. So, you have to, they understood these concepts, but they still weren't putting them together. And what I found was it wasn't the intellectual side of things, it was the social side of things, the same things that I was having trouble with.
Yeah.
And so very informally, I would help them and guide them through a lot of the same issues that I was having, and showing them like, hey, here's how you stick up for yourself, and here's how you speak to people with confidence, and here's how you make eye contact, and here are the social skills that you're going to need to make that math work for you in real life. And when one of my professors saw me doing this, we began talking about it. And I told him about my whole music theory thing. And he said, VCU has a TED Talk. You should apply. And I said, no, because speaking to 1,000 people is way different than speaking to one. Speaking to one person was hard enough as is. And he said, you really should, as this is a bonus assignment and I'm not really going to make it a choice for you anymore because it's going to help you grow. So
Wow.
I'm going to hound you on it until you at least apply. So I applied. And when you go through TEDx, I forget how many stages of interviews it was, but they have you tell your idea in a minute, explain it in 5 minutes, do these in-person auditions, this, that, and the other. And so I'd have to do these. I mean, it was round after round after round of interview. Every time I do one, I'd be like, I hope they just boot me from this damn thing already. and they didn't, much to my chagrin.
Mm.
So the TEDx comes up, and I realize I'm sharing it with, I have to look up their names. There were a couple local business owners. We had a United States ambassador to, I want to say it was a country in Africa.
Wow.
Was it Ghana? I'm not sure. I would have to look it up again, but some pretty high profile people.
Yeah.
And I said, just put me on stage first because I want to get it over with. And I don't want to look at all these other awesome people doing this and then get even worse stage fright. This was really my first, I'll say, real introduction to public speaking outside. Maybe I have to give a quick presentation on one of my art projects I did.
Right.
And yeah, so I got up there. My speech was, again, around communication and music theory. I think it was 18 minutes. And this was over the course of 3 months that I first applied to actually doing the TED Talk. So I had to get over my fear in about 3 months while going through all the rigmarole of applying. And what was the icing on the cake is the TEDx organizers had me play guitar on stage. They were like begging. It's like, oh, you got to play something. I'm like, no way. Like, I thought I wanted to be a musician, but this is way too scary. But they talked me into it anyway. So I had to write like a quick little, it's a little tiny solo thing. Nothing crazy, but something that I knew I could play with ease and sound nice. And I did that whole thing. I played guitar in front of, I want to say it was around 1,000 people, if I remember correctly. Gave my 18-minute talk, walked off stage, took off all my stuff, and sat down and was like, wow, that was cool. I want to do that again. And that spawned the whole public speaking thing. I started doing more pitch competitions, earning funding for one of the small businesses I had at the time, helped other businesses around Richmond, helped coach them on their pitches, got businesses into accelerators, pre-accelerators, and really started finding my niche. Like, wow, I might actually be kind of good at this. So,
wow, that's impressive and so inspiring, really, because I think there's a lot of people that are so scared to take that leap and get on stage or to, doing a TED talk that's a pretty big deal. So um, that's awesome. And so you've done multiple stages on you've been on networks, you're a coach to help other entrepreneurs or coaches to find their voice and to get out there to find clients. And so I want to uh, make sure people can who are interested in finding you, and obviously you have a great energy and a great personality, and so where can people come and find you, look you up, connect with you if they're interested in hiring you as a coach or a consultant? uh,
Mhm.
I'm not sure what you call yourself, but uh, yeah, where can they find you? Where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I have a couple outlets. The best way to reach me, I like when people shoot me emails in person. I respond to all my emails.
Awesome.
I like to keep a clean inbox. It's like my thing. And so I'll go through and actually read each one of my emails. Some people call that masochistic, and maybe it is, but I really do like when people email me. And maybe we can put it in the comments or something because my name's spelled really weird. But you can shoot me an email at alexanderdietrich@galahad.com. So that's spelled, my name's spelled really weird. So it's ALIXANDERDIETRICH I also have a forum on Facebook that I'm growing because a lot of people like Facebook. So I figured I'd start one up there, and it's called the Conquer Your Speaking Fear Forum. Just search it, give us a join, give us a holler. I'd love to talk to you on there. And yeah, I have a couple others, but those are the best ones I would say to reach me at.
Cool. And this is such a needed thing that uh, people. I mean, yeah, this is a huge thing for most people, and what probably holds them back more than almost anything, I would think, is just getting in front of people, getting their voice out there, and speaking. And so there's a huge market for sure out there. So, um, and then I quickly, before I kind of wrap up my last question, I always like to ask, Galahad, how did you come up with the name Galahad? Because there's got to be a story there.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. So I'm actually going through rebranding now, but I'm going to keep Galahad for my own thing. Eventually, we're just going to be called Conquer Your Speaking Fear, but Galahad is a nod to that group of friends that I had, and we called ourselves back then. We called ourselves the Knights of the Square Table because we got one of those cheap card tables that you pick up at Walmart. We'd sit around, drink beer, smoke cigars, and just talk about life, lax philosophy. I like to call it because we're no Socrates or anything like that, but we sure as heck try. And but yeah, I called it Galahad because in Arthurian lore, Galahad, Sir Galahad, was the knight who was purest of heart and was the one who was able to capture the Holy Grail. He was actually able to,
Right.
one of the few who saw it. He was the only one who was actually able to hold it, if I remember correctly. And he did that because he was true to himself. He was true to other people around. And I felt that when you're able to speak and communicate with people in a way that you're not, thinking about what's the next thing, but you're really trying to be present. That's, to me, that was my holy grail, was being able to communicate with people and being present with them and being curious about them and learning, and the success that's brought me. And so there's a bunch of companies out there named Galahad with the A in the middle. So I just took the A out and called it Galahad for ease of, it was a more pragmatic use than an artistic one. But yeah, so that's the reason why it's called Galahad. It's a little nod to the Knights of Square Table and the treasure that I found by being with those
Very cool.
folks.
Yeah, love it. That's so fun. Um, so I always like to ask, or kind of wrap up
Mm-hmm.
the conversation with this question, and that is, if there's one to maybe three things that you would say someone needs to unleash the greatness within themselves, what would those be?
I'm going to leave it at one. And that one thing, because everything else falls in place for me when I remember this. If all else fails, do it for the story. If all else fails, do it for the story. And the reason I say that is A lot of times, I'm guilty of being a perfectionist. I'm guilty of trying to expect an outcome. But the transformational moments of my life, including the really embarrassing ones, when I sat back and said, okay, the odds of me getting what I really want out of this are slim to none. But man, wouldn't it be hilarious if I did it anyway? Like, can't I just leave with something awesome out of this? And that has led to really the most profound changes, positive changes, changes that have allowed me to be more confident, grow closer to my friends and family, to be on here. I mean, it's I think about some of the stories that I have where just being confronted with a problem or wanting to reach out to be on a podcast, right? And just nobody's heard of me yet. I mean, how many people have heard on me being a podcast when I first started doing podcast guests? And it was like, you know what are they going to do? Say no? I can reach out to the Joe Rogan podcast or jump on Fox or whatever it is, and I can go and be like, hey, this person said no, or I can get that experience and land on other opportunities and things like that. So, yeah, just do it for the story.
Do
Things
it for
fall
the
into place.
story. Yeah, I love that. I think it sums up very nicely to put yourself out there and don't be afraid what other people think or what they're going to say, and just be you.
Yeah.
So, I love that. My wife, we have 5 daughters, and she has always taught them it doesn't hurt to ask
Yeah.
in anything. Oh,
Absolutely.
you didn't do well on a test. Go ask your teacher if you can retake it. Well, what if they say no? What if they do? Then you're in the same boat you are now. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
Just like you can ask to be on big podcast, Seth Rogen or whoever, and yeah, they might say no, but what if they say yes?
Well, they say yeah.
That's awesome. So I love that. That's a great way to summarize everything that we've been talking about. I absolutely love the stories, and you know, it, uh, yeah, just your transformation from being this kid who barely could even talk to his own family to being up on stage, giving TED Talks, being on podcasts, being on TV networks, and sharing his story out there, helping other people find their message and to be themselves is fantastic. So, kudos to you. Thank you for everything that you shared. I absolutely loved it. And for those of you who are listening, if you want to get a hold of AJ and connect with him, then I will drop the links in the description of this podcast or on my YouTube, wherever you're listening or watching this, as well as on Facebook and Instagram. And go and connect with him if you feel that you could use a little bit more help in the area of public speaking or just putting yourself out there. If you're a self-proclaimed introvert and you feel like you just need a little bit of push to go out there and be a little bit less introverted, because I don't think anybody ever gets over being an introvert, but you can be less introverted, I think.
For sure. And hey, for all you introverts out there, public speaking, believe it or not, is your platform. I can get into it, but we'll talk about that in person. But it's your platform, believe it or not.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I think that a lot of people who do a lot of public speaking will say that they're probably introverted and they probably do better in front of large crowds speaking instead of maybe one-on-one conversations. So, yeah, no, I agree. So, thank you so much for your insights, your stories. It was so much fun. I appreciate you being on the show, AJ. And, yeah, thanks for coming on and sharing everything that you shared. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Adam. This is a good time. You have a great show, and I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. And everybody, I hope that you'll go out there and be the best you can be and start tapping and unleashing your greatness today. Have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you later.